Tonight I speak candidly with no transparency and with total honesty at any cost. The time has come. The time has come to do what is right and what is best for all of the county. Tonight I will make one final attempt to inform and persuade. The board has heard testimony of many. Much of the subject matter has been repeated again and again. Many say that they see both sides of the issue. I suggest that there are many more sides than two. Now I wish to offer input on just one side from the perspective of zoning in my office. As others have done, I will need to repeat some things for clarification. I ask that you forgive me and perhaps hold your questions till the end if possible. Again, a brief history. My office received no complaints about STRs until 2011. Current and past staff can verify this. At the beginning of 2011, it was the personal agenda of a few to regulate STRs. A few convinced the zoning committee to discuss the issue. The committee voted to not regulate STRs because they were not a problem and because our ordinance did not accurately address that type of land use. Strangely, almost within a month of that committee decision, we got a complaint that someone in Little Bear was renting their house. I explained to the caller that our office did not regulate short-term rentals and had never done so. I explained that the state, however, did require a license in regulated rentals. The complaints were followed with demands for regulation and enforcement. The committee and I were almost forced to do something with our current ordinance language. A legal opinion was obtained that said we could utilize our current ordinance because an STR met the definition of a resort. Resorts were listed in some districts, but not in residential. Little Bear wanted zoning to begin enforcing the ordinance using the resort definition immediately. The committee realized that they couldn't just suddenly change how something is interpreted, so they devised a process to allow renters a window of opportunity to become compliant, after which time we would begin to enforce using the resort definition. Those renting in residential had to first obtain a rezone and a CUP to comply. Those renting in R1 and above only needed a CUP. The rest of the history you are familiar with. Several CUPs have been issued to owners in RR1 zoning with little or no problems. The three cases involving rezones on Long Lake, however, are partly why we are here tonight. So where are we? Look behind me. Remember and consider the testimony you have heard. Some would have you believe the entire county is in turmoil over the issue of STRs. I must admit that it feels that way, but that is not the case. The controversy is largely based on Long Lake. There have been specific complaints on only 3 other lakes since this issue began. One on Gull Lake, one on Upper Kimball, and more recently one on Slim Lake. That is it. My office and the Land and Water Conservation Department have been harassed for over a year. I and other employees have been personally attacked. I have reason to believe my job is in jeopardy. My personal integrity has been challenged. Last week, I was interrogated by 2 county board members about enforcement. We lost our full-time enforcement person 2 years ago and have worked extra hard not to let enforcement slide. Frankly, I am upset at the implication that we are not doing our jobs. At this point, I see 3 options, one of which is the ordinance amendment, which I will get back to in a moment. Option 1, leave the ordinance as it is. Consider STRs to be a 1-unit resort. Those zoned R1 or higher must have a CUP to rent out their home. Those in residential must rezone to R1 and then apply for a CUP. This has been a disaster, largely because the three that tried to obtain a rezone were denied. Worse, the committee offered a window of opportunity to become compliant. The owners did what they were asked to do and were denied, mostly due to politics. The process is flawed, especially on Long Lake. Who will ever get a rezone on Long Lake? That means that STRs will be illegal across the board on that lake in the township. Imagine if I had an enforcement staff of 50 and we were able to stop all of the rentals. In theory, imagine Long Lake with no place for rent. Those on Long Lake are fighting to preserve the residential zoning largely because they don't want a rental next to them. I can certainly see that point. Knowing some history, though, I would argue that Long Lake is zoned inappropriately in the first place. New zoning districts were introduced in 1977 with the new zoning ordinance. The town of Long Lake lobbied hard to keep their old residential zoning, partly because it did not allow mobile homes. Today, most of Long Lake remains R, but the residential neighborhoods look the same as those zoned RR1. The homes are interspersed with shops, vape stores, multi-unit resorts, restaurants, and bars. The process is faulty and skewed. Long Lake has a logical way to keep STRs out of their backyards, and they are using it. Long Lake is a residential lake, as much as perhaps or more than any other. The current ordinance will not stop rentals on Long Lake, it will drive them further underground. Many of the complaints about STRs cannot be stopped by zoning or by this ordinance. Renters and owners are people, and people do dumb things. They do not follow rules and they chase loons, as we heard yesterday. Most developed lakes have a public access. It is not only renters causing problems. It is my opinion that many of the problems that we hear about are an unfortunate part of owning property on a developed lake. Option 2, amend the ordinance. This was my call it what it is and put it where it is suggestion. I spoke to the board in May and said that process was flawed. I offered a suggestion and was told to take it to zoning to fix it. I did so, and it did not pass the committee. Mr. Kohler may further explain your options dealing with that, but in retrospect, I personally believe that may not be the way to go. It does have some positive points. It defines STRs for what they are and eliminates the need to rely on a definition that was never intended to mean a single unit. It levels the playing field and offers a permit where the rentals are actually occurring, and it takes the rezone out of the process, where each property can be evaluated on its own merit. The process has been compared to the one used in the city of Shell Lake. So what's the problem? One, we are not Shell Lake. They have one main lake and a police force. The county has 970 lakes. It may be possible to enforce the conditions on an issued CUP, but I simply do not have the time and staff to do it. If the board passes the amendment, I will have to lobby for more staff. If the new program is not enforced to the liking of some, the situation we have seen and heard will continue. A similar process has been used in Burnett County. I am told that enforcement is nearly impossible of those who do it without a CUP. I was also told that the CUPs themselves are not much of a problem because the committee denies most of them anyway because of neighbor objection. I could see that happening here in some areas. Why have a program if you're going to deny the applications? Option 3. I am here tonight to ask you to strongly consider this option, which is to turn back the hands of time to 2 years ago and get out of the rental business. Decide as a board and as a county that this activity is something that you do not want to regulate. The state of Wisconsin already does, has for some time. The required state license is an annual approval. The license deals with such things as septic sizing, setting occupancy limits, safety and health violations, and more. What are we gaining by regulating STRs? The state consistently passes down unfounded mandates to county zoning offices. In some cases, we run the program and pay them the fee. Why should we do one more that they already do? Will there be lawsuits? Sure. There will be no matter what we do, but we know that there is the right to rent legislation pending right now. I suggest we get out before we are told that we have to and have to refund thousands in permit fees. In closing, I do sympathize with every view I've heard, but zoning or the county cannot fix everything. The problems that we all experience are not because of STRs, they are because of human behavior, and unfortunately there are more of us every day. That's another story. Perhaps we should try the old-fashioned art of conversation. If your neighbor is renting to an undesirable person, have a friendly conversation with him and ask him to be more discriminating. To those who say, what about the lakes? My answer is that there are three things that are most detrimental to lakes. They are near-shore development, septic system condition and placement, and the presence or absence of a shoreline buffer. Those things are what zoning is all about. Let us get back to that.